And now live streaming. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the September 2023 Education Policy and Directions Standing Committee meeting. I'm Trustee Duncan. I will be stepping in to chair the committee this evening. Regrets from your usual chairperson, Trustee Mabobi. I also wanted to start us off in a good way by recognizing and acknowledging both the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations on whose traditional territories we live, we learn, and we do our work. Special welcome back to Trustee McNally. It's nice to see you here around the standing committee table. Welcome back. Just wanted to go over a few procedural matters just to remind everybody. I know we've had a couple of months off, or at least some of us have. And so just in terms of process at the standing committee meetings, you'll see that there's often trustees here who are not voting members of the committee. And so some trustees who are voting members will vote when I call a vote. And that is Trustee David, Trustee Bayo, Trustee McNally, normally Trustee Mabobi, and then myself as an ex officio member. The other just procedural matter is that at standing committees, it's a little more informal. It's not like a board meeting, so there is room for having some more free-flowing discussion. That's the intention behind these committee meetings. So please do feel free, regardless of whether you're a trustee or a partner or a rights holder or a member of staff, to raise your hand and I'll call on you in turn. We welcome discussion here at this table. Okay, so without further ado, and if there are no questions, I'm going to move for approval of the agenda. Again, at standing committee, we do not need a seconder, so I just need someone to move approval of the agenda. Thank you, Trustee David. Any changes or amendments to the agenda this evening? All right, seeing none. Again, I'll call on the voting members of the committee. All those in favor of the agenda. And that is unanimous. Thank you, trustees. Okay, so we have a set of minutes, and these are our minutes from the June Education Policy and Directions Committee meeting. May I have a mover? Thank you, Trustee Bayo. Any changes or amendments to the minutes? All right, hearing none, all those in favor of approval of the minutes from June? And Trustee McNally, may I have your vote? Oh, sorry. Okay, so that's any abstentions?
Chair, I don't feel as though I should vote because I wasn't there.
Yeah, I just caught up. Okay, so that's 3 in favor and 1 abstention. Thanks, Trustee McNally. Yeah, I appreciate that you weren't there. Okay, any business arising from the minutes? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to move us into our new business. And so new business at C1, we have a parent education fund update for 2022-23, and I'm going to pass the reins over to Superintendent Whitten.
Great, thank you very much, Chair Duncan. This is information that will be going out later this week. We do have a parent education fund this year. This fund supports parents as they look for the year as learning opportunities. We invite all PACs to submit an application, and then they can get $250 to support their learning for that year. We review them and distribute them as they come in. So usually we take them until November 3rd, and then if we have any funds remaining, we'll distribute it until the $6,000 is gone. But just letting people know, we'll be sending that out on the 13th of September, and then welcome any questions that PACs may have with that regard, but it remains to be the same as what we've done in the past years.
Thank you very much, Superintendent. Anybody have any question about that? Yeah, Trustee McNally, go ahead.
I just want to recognize former trustee Ann Whitaker for starting this fund. And I believe it's really valuable for schools, and I expect it will continue. So thanks. Shout out to Anne, who's not with us any longer. She's doing other things.
Thanks, Trustee McNally. Any other questions or comments regarding the Parent Education Fund? Just a reminder to to PACS to apply for your grants. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is an annual report, the anaphylaxis aggregate report for 2022-23. And again, Superintendent Whitten, I will pass the virtual gavel onto you.
Great, thank you again. Hopefully is that a little bit clearer than it was last time? Any clearer? Not any clearer?
No, you're quite quiet.
Hi.
Yeah. I don't know if
Might be a first, Andy, but okay, we'll speak a little louder then, and hopefully people can hear me. This is an annual anaphylaxis report as per our regulation 5141.21. It is a requirement that I report yearly on the number of anaphylactic incidents that we've had. So for the 22-23 school year, we had 2 incidents reported to us. And what we do with that information is when it comes to us in the year, when we're aware of an anaphylactic incident, depending on the level or what occurred, we do bring that back to principals and vice principals and talk about if there's any learning that can be had with that. But as the regulation, this is the annual aggregate number.
Thank you, Superintendent. I want to open the floor for questions regarding the report. I believe this year we had 2 incidents. Superintendent, I'm wondering, just speaking to mitigations or any trends that we've identified in terms of this aggregate reporting. We do it every year. And I know we have a number of years now that we can look back on and reflect on whether there are any trends. And then from there, whether there are any mitigations or change in practice that we want to implement. Just wondering if you can kind of give us a little bit of context on what you've seen over the years in terms of the type of incidents and whether there are any trends or have been any mitigations or change in practice.
I think there's been a lot of allergy aware conversations that have happened at the school level. So I think that when we look at food related gatherings or celebrations, we're much more aware about bringing the food that we do bring into the schools. And so I think the education piece at the school level has been much better. And as a result, we've seen fewer and fewer incidents. Sometimes this happens with a younger student, and so they're not quite yet aware of maybe all of their allergies or all of their allergens. And from the most recent, I would say over the past 2 or 3 years, often these are incidents that happen at an elementary school. So we do bring these topics back to principal meetings and vice principals and just talk through if there's something that we can learn from it. And other times it is either a food source that was unknown and something that was packed for lunch, or something that did occur by accident, but no real patterns as we've moved forward from the last 3 years.
Thanks, Superintendent Whitten. Do we, in terms of school events, often what we hear in community is that school events are particularly challenging, just in terms of managing those from an anaphylaxis risk perspective. I wonder if you can share with us some of the planning and the learning that goes into planning those school events through the lens of anaphylaxis risks.
Yeah, happy to. So again, as I mentioned, we are much more allergy aware. And so when schools are looking to have events, we're looking to be as inclusive as we can. And we try not to introduce those allergens into the school environment while we can't promise that they don't exist, as that would be very difficult to manage. We do try and make sure that people within that learning community are aware of the allergy that exists in the school and to avoid bringing those types of products in. So again, I think over the last 3 or 4 years, trying to be as inclusive as we can and bring food in that doesn't involve an allergy or an anaphylactic reaction. So I think that information goes out every year from schools around what allergies exist in either classrooms or the school as a whole. And then a real encouragement for the whole learning community to be aware of it and to be mindful when they're packing food sources. Having said that, though, there
there are many allergies out there, and so we're doing our best to make sure people are aware of them.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for Superintendent Whitten in relation to the anaphylaxis aggregate annual report? Okay, all right. Thanks again, Superintendent. Appreciate it. Okay, so folks, we're going to move on to C3. This is our draft enhancing student learning report for 2023-24. Just a reminder, we previously referred to this as FESL, the framework for enhancing student learning. So just noting the change in name, but we're really doing the same thing, but we're now calling it the enhancing student learning report. So Superintendent Whitten, I know that the team, you yourself, Superintendent, Deputy Superintendent Caldwell and Associate Superintendent Arts are going to present this item together. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and then I'll let you direct your compatriots as needed.
Thank you. So I'll just introduce it. In the fall of 2020, as the memo states, the Ministry of Education, now Ministry of Education and Childcare, brought forward the Enhanced Student Learning Reporting Order. And the order does require that we submit a report each year. It does have, well, now it's referenced as the Enhancing Student Learning Report, as opposed to what was the framework for Enhancing Student Learning. And it brings a formalized approach to planning and reporting that we do. It has some expectations with the focus that we are required to include in the report, and you'll see the report is attached in our ed policy agenda. And Deputy Superintendent will outline the key components of the draft report. It is draft at this time, as we expect further feedback to come in, welcome feedback, and it will go for approval at the September board meeting, with the final submission being due on October 3rd. So I'll pass it over to Deputy Superintendent to walk us through Enhancing Student Learning Report.
Thank you, Superintendent Whitten, and through the chair. One of the things that you may have noticed with this particular report is that since it was sent to you in early July, there have been a number of iterations of the report. And what we've been trying to do is to really make it user-friendly and have blocks of data that support what the report should contain. So easily readable as opposed to just straight text, and linking it to the data that we see in the package as well. So we have a slightly new look to it. I hope it's reader-friendly, and any feedback you can provide to us on that would be appreciated as well. With this report, you'll note that in the first section of the report, it really is about the strategic plan and what our focus has been on since 2020. So the 3 goals are listed there with the strategies and the actions that have come out of that strategic plan as well. With each of those goals, you'll see that we've highlighted some of the successes where we've started different projects within each of those goals, and we're looking at how we're taking those to the next level. The other part of the report really does focus on what is required, and the 3 areas that the ministry is requesting us to report on. The area of intellectual development, and that's where we see our literacy and our numeracy data. We have the area on human and social development, and that's where we can see the data on how students feel welcome, safe, and supported or connected. And then we also have the career development section, which includes data on the 5-year completion rate and that post-secondary transition. So right away from grade 12, the following year from grade 12, and I think there's data that they track in year 3 as well. So those 3 sections are required within the report. We also have a section where we look at alignment and really how are we using resources that we have available to support what we say we are wanting to do with our ESLR document. So that particular alignment is there, and you will see that for this year, Secretary Treasurer has included the areas where there was a reallocation of resource to support. I believe there's probably at least a dozen or so different options of support there as well. And that really is the ESLR document. Again, It is required to be submitted to the board by the end of the month. They have extended that to October the 30th. We are open to any feedback you may have to support that document. And again, as always, looking at not all of the data, like you'll see just very specific pieces of data there, but certainly there's a lot of data there. And as Associate Superintendent Arts mentioned earlier, we are now really taking a dive into that data so that we can provide you that active data, if you will, that is showing the shift in what we are providing in terms of resource. And if not, then what do we do? What are the next steps in our process? So happy to take any questions related to our draft document.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent. Okay, so I'm going to open it up to some questions, and then I'm going to focus in on some particular sections of the document and what our kind of strategies and goals are around, for instance, literacy, numeracy, and so on. So we'll kick off with Trustee McNally.
Thank you. I just want to get in a little complaint about the new Acrobat. All my notes disappeared when I saved this after making copious notes, so you'll be spared because some of the notes have disappeared. I just on the first page, and thank you for this document. It really is very readable and very accessible. We do have pride in on the first page providing quality education programs through various programs of choice. But what I don't see there is programs of choice for students with developmental delays or intellectual challenges. And we should be proud of providing programs of choice for those students. So, you know, we have Victor School. I hope we still have Arbutus. I hope we still have Reynolds. You know, the best learning environment for everyone isn't always the best learning environment for individuals. I didn't put that very well, but you get what I mean. It's the graphic with the box, right? So I hope in future iterations, we can recognize that we do have opportunities for parents and students to explore in those realms of learning.
Thank you, Trustee McNally. Perhaps we could look to just taking that into account, that feedback in terms of how we're reflecting in the document our varying programs and options. Okay, yeah, thanks so much. Deputy Superintendent, go ahead.
Thank you for that, Trustee McNally. And yes, we still have Victor, we still have Arbutus, and we still have Reynolds. And that's very good advice in terms of recognizing all, so we'll try and incorporate something. And for all of you here, I know sitting here working through Zoom, it's not always, I'm trying to take notes to capture this. So please, if you have something that you really want me to focus on, send it in an email and I can add it that way as well, but happy to continue the conversation.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent. Okay. Any other general comments before we maybe open it up to some dialogue around what the data is telling us and some of the proposed strategies in the draft report? I mean, the goal is, again, the timeline is that the board approves this at the end of September, so at the September board meeting. And then I believe this year, as the superintendent pointed out, the ministry has given school districts a little bit more time. I think it's till the 3rd of October to actually submit the report. So I assume that's to allow school districts to make some amendments that might come out of board meetings in September, give staff a little bit more turnaround time before it's submitted to the ministry. So this meeting is quite important in terms of it being an opportunity for folks to share their feedback prior to the board meeting. So yeah, so if we can maybe go, I would suggest that maybe we look at each section. So maybe if we start with literacy and we look at what the literacy section is telling us about how our students are doing, and then maybe some of we could pull out and highlight some of the suggested strategies in the report. Superintendent, would you suggest who's best to lead us through the literacy section?
I think all three of us are here. I think Deputy Superintendent Caldwell spent the most time on this report. So as he mentioned, he would be taking notes for either questions we're not able to answer today or comments that they would like embedded into the report.
Sounds good. In terms of literacy, maybe I'll kick us off. In terms of literacy, so I know last year our goal was to increase literacy achievement by 2%. And I'm wondering if we can reflect on sort of where we are and have a little bit of a discussion about some of the strategies we're planning to use in the coming school year to support improving literacy achievement. So I'll turn it over to the Deputy Superintendent.
Well, as indicated in the section on page 11 on literacy, in particular with the FSA scores, we noted that for all grade 4 resident students, they remained unchanged at 80%. So we didn't go down. We were able to maintain. And when we take a little closer look at the provincial data, and again, this is where Associate Superintendent Arts mentioned that we shouldn't always be looking at the provincial data as a comparator, because what we see in the provincial data is they actually drop from 73 to 67%. And I'm sorry, my progressive lenses are difficult to read this at this point, but what we're looking at here particularly with this literacy data is, did we meet, and as you said, Chair Duncan, we said it would increase by 2%. Did we meet it? No, we haven't. But so what are those other strategies that we're going to look at that are going to support that? And you'll see at the bottom of the page, and this is through the partners downstairs and the work that they've done within literacy for a district. We're looking at intentionally activating the four agreements to support literacy achievement. And I'm not going to read them all out to you, but they are there, listed there. And the other focuses, if you take a look on the top right, you'll see that we're going to focus on increasing Indigenous student achievement that's on track and extending for FSA 4 and 7. So what our literacy team will be working with our schools is, how are we looking at our Indigenous data and really applying what we know can support that increase. For example, attendance data. Are we looking at keeping our group of students together as cohorts as they're working through at particular schools or priority schools, for example? So that focus will be continued through this process throughout the year. And we know that, again, we're not going to see it happen overnight, and we know it didn't happen this year, but at least we were able to maintain, particularly for our grade 4. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Thank you, Deputy Superintendent. Go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate the question and the follow-up as we look at, this is year 3 of the literacy framework. And so when we're looking at changes to FSA, some of these students are now entering into that time where they may write an FSA. So looking at making sure that we're continuing to support the 10 priority schools with additional sort of leveled interventions, and building that beyond so that all teachers in elementary schools have access points to professional development and support. So I think if the board is interested or the committee is interested, we could have the literacy group come and speak about specifics that they do in those 10 priority schools and where they support all 28 schools, because we do have sort of a 3-tiered approach to supporting schools, and they are best served to provide that, the district literacy teachers as well as Mr. Hovis.
Thanks, Superintendent. So just to summarize then, your expectation is that the next round of grade 4 FSAs should be one indication of whether or not our literacy framework is working in the way that we hoped?
Yes, I think so. And I also think it would be worthwhile hearing what other measures we're utilizing in schools, like report card information and proficiency scales, to understand if the if what we're doing is making a difference and how we tweak that along the way, because I think this is one measure, as you've mentioned, and there are other measures that we should be paying attention to.
Yeah, no, thanks. That makes sense. So, I wanted to turn it over to Trustee McNally, I think, who had her hand up next. Go ahead.
Thank you. As I look through the pink part, I think it's on page 11 or else page 10. I can't quite see here. In the middle. Wow, my screen's doing weird things. I apologize. In the middle of the pink chart, there's a statement: launch optional district literacy assessments at the grades 3, 6, and 9 level. And I find that really exciting. I think that's a brilliant move on the part of the district. I'm hoping, probably stating the obvious, that stakeholders from the GVTA are teachers who are going to be administering this and using it, that they have great input, and that we have representatives from the nations who may have some valuable comments about how their learners would react to the instrument when it's developed. So I think, in the development phase, that's important. And I'm sure you've recognized that, senior staff, to involve at the very least, and the urban folks and Métis, the 4 houses really should be in on this, as well as the GVTA. And I hope they are. I really look forward to hearing more about how this instrument is developing.
Thank you, Trustee McNally. I think the intention, Superintendent, is to roll those optional assessments out this coming school year. Is that right?
I just would like to comment that, in the spirit of full consultation, some of you may have been around long enough to remember ORCA. I certainly do, and it was a problem. So I hope we don't face that again.
Thanks, Trustee McNally, for the follow-up. Trustee Gagnon, and then Lena, welcome. And you're next on the speakers list. Yeah, Trustee Gagnon, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, in terms of the design, I guess, of the 6 pink squares, there's sort of an arrow pointing down from the top row to the bottom row, and I'm wondering if there was meant to be sort of a one coming before the other in that regard with those columns, or if that was just simply a design choice.
Thank you, Trustee Gagnon. I don't know who's best placed to speak to that question.
To the chair, it was just design.
All right. Yeah, go ahead, Lena. Welcome. Nice to see you.
Hi, thank you. I am just wondering, I guess when I'm looking at, it seems like a lot of the data is actually being collected from FSA scores. And I know that there are, many students who actually opt out of that. The optional literacy assessments, a lot of teachers felt that some of them took a lot of instructional time out of the student day where they're actually collecting data already in their classrooms. And I'm just wondering if maybe it could be included, or we think about including some of the data that teachers already collect in their classrooms for literacy, because I know that there's an abundance. And ideally, from my teaching colleagues want to collect in this, they are already assessing and collecting information and data on their students. They know their students. And so putting extra assessments isn't necessarily a great thing for the students in the classroom. So I'm just wondering if there's a way to add some other specific data collecting measures that teachers already do for literacy in the classroom.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we just for your information, the board has discussed and with the senior leadership team the reporting data that's available, like in terms of literacy and numeracy. So for instance, obviously the report card data that everybody works so hard preparing a few times a year would obviously be a source of information. And I just wanted to clarify, Lena, was there other data in addition to the report card data that you were speaking to?
No, I'm speaking of all of the data collected essentially for the report card.
Yeah, no, okay, great. Just wanted to make sure I understood. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, no, that is a discussion that we're having. Superintendent, did you have anything you wanted to add at this stage about other data in addition, or Deputy Superintendent? Go ahead.
Thank you for that, Lena. Yes, as we look to build other iterations of this particular document, we do look at or want to incorporate more of our local story. The order in itself is very, very specific, and we're required to report in the order of the provincial assessment data, and that's why it's there. But we also have data that we know, and you've spoken to it, Chair, several times now about attendance and report card data, and those pieces are important parts of this document as well. And over time, we will get more of that document or more of that data to support a very Victoria-based conversation.
Thank you very much. The other things that kind of come out from the literacy section is our focus again on Pro-D. This was the focus last year in terms of literacy. I wonder if there's any changes to the approach around Pro-D or any difference in the focus given what we know about student needs. Superintendent, yeah, go ahead. And then Lena, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, is it my turn? Okay.
Okay. Actually, I think the superintendent I'm not sure if the superintendent wanted to kick us off. And then is that right, superintendent?
That's
okay.
Yeah. I was just going to say that we do look to provide some levels of professional development, but as our different people or the breadth and depth of the department's changes over years, we don't have as many people to offer professional development. So that's something that we've seen certainly over the last 3 years. So we will not be focusing in on that as much as we've been able to in the past.
Thank you, Superintendent. Lena, go ahead.
And I was just going to mention, as the Pro-D chair, I do approve funding for teachers to participate in various Pro-D opportunities. And there are a number of groups in schools participating in book clubs specific to literacy, as well as, last year we did have that BCTF teacher inquiry group from Craig Flower that specifically focused on literacy, and even some teacher helping teacher and collaboration situations where teachers are participating in professional development towards literacy.
Yeah, thanks very much. The only other thing I really wanted to highlight, and if there's no one else that has anything they want to add before we move on to the next section, was just around children and youth in care. So I'm wondering if we have anything we can add on our focus on supporting children and youth in care when it comes to literacy learning.
Yeah. Through the chair.
Whoever can speak to it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So yes, we are working very closely with all of our schools with our activation of our children and youth in care plan. Yes, last year we saw significant work building educational plans for all of our children and youth in care. I just want to point out that there is a gap in that data within our district between us and the Ministry of Children and Family Development. So we only know who we can identify as the children in care within our system. We don't know all of the children in care unless they have presented by a social worker in our building. So this will be year 2. We are working very closely with the Ministry of Children and Families. We have an upcoming October meeting where we will meet with delegated agencies as well, and looking at how are we supporting these individual priority students within all of our schools. So there's been a lot of work. I know the data, if we take a look at the data from last year in the report, doesn't look that positive, but based on our stabilizing, if you will, our children in care within our district, we're hopeful that we will see that data shift upwards for the next round.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent. We look forward to hearing how that work goes. Okay, so I want to move us on to literacy. Again, give everybody an opportunity to speak to the strategies and have any discussion about where we are seeing our learners in terms of literacy. So yeah, I just want to open the floor to some dialogue. Superintendent or Deputy Superintendent, is there anything from the literacy section in terms of how students are doing and the strategies that we're going to activate moving forward that you wanted to speak to in particular or highlight?
You referring to the numeracy?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I thought you said literacy. Nothing here that's specific to highlight.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, I think what we're seeing is a general sort of decline in numeracy achievement. And so obviously, again, we're going to want to look to some of the other data that we have available and then look to the strategies that we're seeing in the draft report. Looks like we're looking to focus on activating the local education agreements and really lean into some of the professional development around numeracy in K-12. We're again launching optional district numeracy assessments at grade 3, 6, and 9. So folks, is there anything that we want to discuss around this? Any feedback we wish to give on the draft before it comes to the board at the end of the month? Okay. I'm not hearing anything, so I'm going to move us on. So we are at the next section is around transitions, and then we go into human and social development and some of our MDI data. Anything from those sections that folks want to discuss this evening? Anything Superintendent or Deputy Superintendent you want to highlight from those sections? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to point out on the top of page 19, you've talked about it earlier when we talked about evergreen and the number of evergreens that were issued. You'll notice at the top right there, that will be a focus of what we do moving forward. We want to review the regular dogwood completion. We want to review the adult dogwood completion, and we want to review the number of evergreen completions as well within the district. So it will be a targeted focus, and that will be part of all of our conversations moving forward as well when we talk about transition.
Great, thanks for highlighting that. Yeah, that is super important work for sure. Okay, Trustee Kwan, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just going kind of down into our pack up a little bit further than it kind of relates maybe to transition, was just our regulation 5123 promotional procedures for secondary schools, and just looking at I think there needs to be some updates to this policy with regards to, the reference to junior and secondary high school, as well as our secondary school 8 to 12, assuming we probably want to get some middle school and high school in there. And so maybe just taking a second look at as a board and throwing it to policy subcommittee to maybe take a look at updating, or perhaps maybe it's more something that superintendent, her team could take on. Just thought I'd throw that out there, that there was, it's I guess a little outdated.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to that discussion, because we definitely I think have some work to do there. Okay, so in terms of the ESL document, is there anything else around human and social development that I guess first and foremost that the superintendent or deputy superintendent wanted to highlight or to speak to?
Thank you, through the chair. I just want to highlight on page 20 what we've noticed with students feeling welcome from grade 10 66% in 2022 to 73% in 23. And if you look through that, you'll see consistently for the data, feeling welcome, feeling safe, and feeling connected for our grade 10 and 12 students, it's all going up. I think one of the issues, particularly with COVID in the last few years, there was a disconnect. And coming back into the system, I think we were able to regenerate that feeling of safety and welcomeness in our buildings. So I really appreciate that data that's sitting there. I do want to say that there is another local data set coming shortly from the McCreary survey that was done. And it does also focus on mental health. Again, it's quite an in-depth survey that was done this year, and it's done every 5 years. And that data will be available to us shortly. And it will capture this for grades 8 through 12 in all of our schools here in Victoria as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that data set and how that can be incorporated into this section as well.
Yeah, we certainly see. So on page 30 of the pack up in terms of what we know, students in terms of feeling connected, you know, we see less of a sense of connection, you know, with children and youth in care and with students with disabilities and diverse abilities. We see some fluctuations with other student populations. So, you know, clearly we've got some more work to do in terms of that. And so I think while we celebrate some increases, I think we also need to take a hard look at some of those other data sets and kind of what our students are feeding back to us through those surveys. Any other thoughts in terms of, you know, our strategies for moving the dial around some of that feeling of belonging and connectedness and that social and emotional well-being of our students that are coming through these data sets?
Well, I think we'll continue to monitor that, as you say, and I think we're looking at as things have progressed over the years in that specific data set, and then also comparing that to all students. So we're mindful of equity gaps in that, and just being more specific on those areas.
Yeah, that perhaps that's something we can kind of look at over the next, you know, the coming weeks, whether there are any additional strategies focused in particular on some of those priority students that we could employ in the year to really try to move the dial on that. Any other feedback? I don't want to rush us through. This is a really important opportunity for folks to engage with this important work. There is a lot of data, and I know not everybody loves the data aspect of this, but it is one indicator of how students are doing, and it is an important one. But there is also that we call, you know, the street data, the feedback we get from communities, from parents, from students directly as well. That's also important for us to reflect on. And so the MDI is one of those kind of data sets where we get to hear directly from students. So it's, you know, it's a very important one. Okay, there's no other comments, questions, suggestions, and I'm going to move us on to career development. Again, opening up the floor to the superintendent or deputy superintendent or associate superintendent, just to highlight anything from this section in terms of what we know and what our strategies are for 2023-24.
So nothing to highlight in this section. Sorry that my camera's off. We're having some sound trouble here, so we're trying to work as best we can. Yeah, nothing to highlight in this section. Happy to take feedback.
Anybody want to raise anything or flag anything in particular? Yeah, Trustee Kwong, go ahead.
I think the thing that struck me the most, and this is really exciting, is, you know, right there on page, I believe it's 25, there's words over it, but participants are 16% more likely than peers to transition to post-secondary. And, that's a pretty important data set there. It means that there's an engagement there, and there's, they're engaged in their owners of that learning. And I wonder if there's some things there that we can really dig into to see if, they'll work in other situations and across the district in other ways. It's just exciting to see.
Thanks, Trustee Kwan.
Thank you for that, Trustee Kwan. I completely agree. And I think what we've come to know is when students have a voice and choice in their path, that they tend to engage more and typically achieve higher levels. So I do think that the Pathways and Partnerships team is always looking at different opportunities for the population, both the students, children, youth in care, as well as students with disabilities and Indigenous students, because I think when they're engaged and when they have voice and when they're choosing their path and we're supporting that, I think that they're more likely to be successful and create their own path, and we support it.
Thanks, Superintendent. Okay, so Trustee Painter, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm trying to recall from budget discussions last year, and of course, it's always, trying to thread the needle of maximum benefits, but it's my recollection that we actually reduced our funding for this portfolio in the last budget. And first, before I go anywhere else, could I get some confirmation of that I'm actually recalling correctly?
Yeah, that's right. There was a reduction. I believe it was around 100,000, but it was very specific, and maybe Secretary Treasurer might be able to assist us in terms of reminding us where that reduction was. Oh, sorry, Secretary Treasurer Stride, we're having a hard time hearing you. Are you able to maybe sit closer to the microphone?
My recollection is that there was a reduction of around 120,000. I'd have to look back just to be 100% sure about that. And I believe that was a reduction in their overall supplies and services budget.
And that was a one-off, was it not, Secretary Treasurer? Like where the department was saying, look, we think we can tighten our belts here with a one-off reduction, or is that an ongoing reduction?
That was an ongoing reduction.
Okay. No, thanks for clarifying.
I guess, Chair, then my follow-up would be that with that in mind, I would be very interested to see if there are any concrete outcomes, that whether or not the program is able to continue to function at the same level of effectiveness, or if this reduction has had negative consequences, because it's one that I've personally witnessed just incredible benefits and results from students who've had the opportunity to either do dual credit or apprenticeships, or there's just such a range of opportunities here that I think is a real success story within our district. And I want to make sure that we do our best to maintain those opportunities.
Thank you, Trustee Painter. And just to clarify, Superintendent, there's been no reduction in the program availability through Pathways and Partnerships. Is that correct?
That is correct. No reduction in what is being offered.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. But yeah, no, I think it's a good point, Trustee Painter. Thanks for raising it. We want to make sure that decisions that we've made are not having negative consequences. Trustee McNally, go ahead.
Thank you. This is a mundane question. I just don't understand something here. It's the second point on page 25, where it says participants are 7% more likely than propensity matched peers to complete high school. I just don't understand that statement, and the propensity matched peers part is something I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Trustee McNally. Superintendent, who's best placed to clarify that terminology and what that means? Yeah.
Chair. I don't know what I'm looking. I'm looking everywhere. That particular language comes right out of the Ministry of Education and Childcare data from the dual credit policy review. So that's their language. We took that data from there and placed it in there.
So just a suggestion, if you know, this is going to be for people to read, maybe put a little explanation in there, because you know, usually I understand what I read, but I didn't understand that at all.
We can define our term. Yeah. Thanks for the feedback, Trustee McNally. Okay. Okay. So so on page 38 of the pack-up, so this is the existing or emerging areas of need. There are 6 that we identify, and again, that is on page 38 of the pack-up. And I think it is page 30 of the report itself. Is there anything from that in terms of, I'm interested in all of it, but I wanted to just have a quick discussion of number 4. So ongoing targeted support for mental health and physical well-being. I'm wondering what we know about, you know, how students feel about the supports that we're providing around mental health and physical well-being. I know that we've partnered and used various supports over the years, and I'm just wondering, you know, what students, or whether we have some feedback from students about how well they're receiving that, if they feel like it's working and they're getting what they need out of those supports, or if we have any data at all about that at this stage.
Thank you, through the chair. During the budget process, we heard a lot of feedback, if you will, from our students that felt that they needed more mental health support, particularly counseling support that went beyond sort of academic counseling and really focused on support for issues like anxiety and attendance and things that were keeping students away from school. And so what we've been looking at, and I know we've talked about this in the past, we have a very limited budget for mental health.
Sorry, Deputy Superintendent, we're having trouble hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Oh, yeah. You're a little echoey, but let's see how we get on.
Pretty good. We just had a major crash of a computer here. So back to my point, we are looking at, you know, mental health supports within our system that go just beyond, or beyond, I shouldn't say just beyond, but beyond that idea of its academic counseling support. And it really is some support that students need with their social emotional learning as well. We found that through, at least with our middle schools, including mental health literacy through grades 6 and 8, physical literacy and so forth. Second step in our elementary schools, we are seeing an impact, ever so slight, but we are increasing our positive experiences for our students. What we really need to focus on, from my perspective, and hearing back from the budget conversation, was that secondary piece, particularly around mental health. And we know with the $48,000 ministry mental health grant, which, by the way, we've received the paperwork to say we'll get another $48,000 this year. Again, it really does limit the amount of work we can do to support. And I know the board has done some great work with increasing our counselors in our building. It really is having that deeper conversation to really start to pull out what is that counseling that our students are asking for. And we will be sharing that data from the budget process through our counselor collaborations coming up this fall. So our counselors will know this is what our students are asking for within our buildings. And we will provide as much as we can in terms of support for our counselors to bring that to our students. I just want to one more piece to this, and a really big piece to this, is the fact that we've engaged in a cross-secondary level, particularly around consent and a lot of the anxiety that has built up around that. So we will be addressing that through our mental health grant as well, very specifically to support our teachers in what they can bring to their students and support them there as well. So that is a major focus as well. So two real big things for secondary from my perspective: the consent work across the district and the work feedback from our budget conversations about what students felt they needed compared to what they felt they were getting. And we're hopeful that through that process, we're able to shift that within our system as well.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent. No, that's great. Yeah, really appreciate those comments and look forward to having those discussions in the context of our budget deliberations this year. Anything else that folks wanted to add around that? Okay, yeah, no, I think any opportunity we get folks to hear back from students about, you know, are the supports we're offering making a difference? Are they meeting their needs? Then it's hugely valuable. So I'm really glad that we've picked up on those and been able to highlight them tonight through our discussion. Anything else, folks? You know, we've got a few more sections. I really am at your disposal as chair if anybody wants to move us into any other aspect of the report. And if not, then I will move us on to our next agenda item. But just a reminder that if there is any more feedback for the senior leadership team around the draft, that you want to provide that by email, as Deputy Superintendent indicated, as soon as possible, because obviously they're going to be working hard to get that finalized for the end of the month. All right. So hearing no other questions, comments, I'm going to move us on. Thanks everybody for the discussion. Our next agenda item this evening is an overview of the presentations that'll be coming to Ed Policy this school year. Deputy Superintendent Caldwell, I'll turn things over to you.
Through the chair again. This is for your information. You will see in the pack-up that there is a memo there outlining the upcoming Ed Policy meetings and the topics that will be covered as we go through the year. I also want to point out that with this particular iteration of our presentations, that we will have a leveled focus for meetings, and they're identified there, whether it be an elementary focus, a middle focus, or a secondary focus. And for each of our presentations that we bring to you this year, we will be bringing schools in that are tied to that focus. School goals, a particular school may have an excellent goal that they've been working on with some really good data at the school level to share with us. And the hope is that through this process, we're getting more of that educational piece back into our meetings so that the schools can share the great work that's going on at the school level and the support that we as the departments of the district provide for that as well. So there you have it there in front of you, and open to any questions or comments as well.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent. Just opening the floor then for anybody that has any questions, comments regarding the plan for Ed Policy and presentations to the committee. Okay, all right, we'll move us on. Thank you, Deputy Superintendent, for that report. So the next item is at C5, and this is a new policy 5150, sanctuary schools. We have a recommended motion that the Board of Education of School District number 61, Greater Victoria, approve new policy 5150, sanctuary schools. This is one that's come to the committee before and then went back for some further feedback and development, and is now coming back again to the committee for review. I just wanted to flag, so we have, I think, the draft that's in the pack-up. So the draft in the pack-up, I think we missed a couple of updates that we made at committee to this. So at page 49 of the pack-up, under section 4 responsibilities, we were going to add in at 4.3, I guess, the usual line that we add around the superintendent is responsible to ensure compliance with the School Act and regulations, board policy, and regulations and ministerial orders. I don't know if we want to move those as amendments. Secretary Treasurer, did you? Yeah, go ahead. If you wanted to clarify. I think we just have an old copy, or maybe not the up-to-date copy of the policy in there, in the packet. Oh, sorry, we can't hear you, Secretary Treasurer. Secretary Treasurer Strad, we can't hear you. We still can't hear you. Oh, still no. Are you able to change your input, your audio input? Are you using the, oh, there we go.
Can you hear me?
Something? Yep, I can hear Superintendent Whitten.
I'll go.
Okay.
I'll go.
Okay.
Being in the same room as the Secretary Treasurer, I believe I know what she was saying. In the pack-up, Chair Duncan, there's the first iteration, which was the first policy for 5150, and then the next page is the next policy with hopefully the revisions.
Yeah, no, you're right. I missed that we did include the second draft. Okay, good. That saves us some time tonight. So I'm glad to see that the most up-to-date draft is there. Okay, thank you, Superintendent. Okay, all right, so we got there in the end. Okay, and yeah, I think that was it. Now that I see we do have the most up-to-date version, then I think we're good. The only other thing I would say is that we do have a policy and a reg on this, and presumably we're looking for some direction around approval of both this evening. And so if the committee does want to move this forward, then I would suggest that we just amend the recommended motion to say both the new policy and regulation. Superintendent or Secretary Treasurer, does that sound sensible to you? That was the intention this evening. Sorry, I can't.
If I could see clarity on that, I think what we had put the regulation in there so that people were aware of the policy and reg, but I wonder with regards to approval, whether the board approves the policy and then the regulation is brought alongside. Is it the board's intent to approve the regulation, or?
Well, I would suggest on this one, I think the direction was to produce a policy and a regulation. And so since the direction was to do both, that the board would approve both, but appreciate that that's not always how it happens. Sometimes the board sort of sets a policy direction and then staff go and put together a regulation. And then sometimes if the board directs, it comes back for board approval, and then sometimes it doesn't. So I think on this one, the board directed that both be produced. So I would suggest that we approve both. Trustee Painter, did you have a comment that you wanted to add around this question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just asking for clarification. I'm scrambling trying to find the regulation in the package. Is what page would it be on?
Let me just find the page. I had trouble. I didn't notice that there was the up-to-date draft. So let me just see if I can do better in finding the regulation. Okay, so the most recent draft of the policy starts on page 51 of the packet. And then, oh, no, it's not in the packet, is it? Unless I've missed it. So it's not in the packet? No, okay. You're right, Trustee Painter, it's not in the packet. So we can't approve something that's not in the packet. Okay, so, well, that's unfortunate. So I guess this evening what we'll do is we'll move the policy, and then maybe what we could do is just refer the regulation to the board. I don't anticipate there's going to be any issues, but that's what I would recommend we do. What we don't want to see is a further delay. We wanted the policy and the reg to roll out for this school year. I don't anticipate there's going to be any concerns, but if there is, we can deal with that at the board table, would be my recommendation. So thank you, Trustee Painter, for pointing out the regulation isn't in the packet. Okay, so we are would be looking to approve for the boards or recommend to the board that it approve the new policy. And then if we're happy to do that, I would suggest we consider a second motion referring the regulation to the September board meeting for review there. Would anybody like to move the first motion if there is no discussion, but I don't want to rush us. So I guess what we'll do is open the floor up to some discussion. Is there any discussion that we want to have as a larger committee, maybe not just trustees, but our partners at the table around the sanctuary school policy? Yeah, hi. Is it Nisa or Nissa? Or do I have that completely wrong?
As I like to say, I'm nice, but it's Nissa.
Nissa, okay, wonderful. I'm glad I asked. Hi,
Yes,
Nissa,
thank you.
Thanks for being here. Go ahead.
I learned to spell it when I was 2 for that exact reason. So well ahead going into school age. My question is, like I've read it. I think I support this concept, of course. I can't imagine how stressful it would be for families to be trying to negotiate education while in a precarious situation from an immigration standpoint. My question is, was there any discussion about what that means or what the policy would mean if potentially there was an enforcement situation, and what would be the role of like I'm talking about if it were decided by Immigration Canada to remove the family, or there's some sort, because these sorts of things happen. What is the role of the school administration, or how do we ensure that that there's a policy in place to mitigate for any conflict that might be happening on school grounds should that happen? Like, you know, just thinking through worst case scenarios, having had experience when I was in school, an immigrant family that for parental reasons, the status was changed for the children, and the community came together and supported them and advocated on their behalf, but not all families have that community connection. So I can imagine potential situations where there may be a conflict on school grounds, and I just wondered if that had been discussed, or if that's beyond the scope of what's going on here.
Thank you very much for the question. Yeah, I think probably would have helped have the regulation as well, just to kind of give some context about implementation. Superintendent, did you want to speak to that question?
I think in the terms of the implementation of the sanctuary schools policy, we'd be looking at it from the perspective of the education piece. So unless the Canadian Border Services Agency had something legally that they were coming in to do or implement, under this policy, they would not be permitted to do that. And oftentimes when we do have issues like this, we would be requesting that they do this in community if they had to do it at all. We're very protective of the students and the families and not wanting that to occur on property or anywhere in the vicinity of the school. So we may have a quiet conversation in the office, but with the individuals to ask them to go and to do that off property if they had to, but we wouldn't be allowing for this unless it was required by law, which I would not anticipate or hope not to anticipate happening.
I'm glad to see that support in place, especially for staff and administrators who may be put in that position.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for the question. Okay, so yeah, and thanks Superintendent for clarifying what this means in practice. Okay, so any other comments, questions before I move us through a potential motion to recommend it to the board? Okay, so I'm not seeing any hands. So would anyone like to move the recommended motion regarding the policy? Trustee McNally, thank you. Just going to go back up to the actual motion itself and just reread it for the committee. Sorry, just bear with me, folks. So it's the Board of Education of SD61 Greater Victoria approve new policy 5150 sanctuary schools. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor, and again, just the voting members of the committee. And that is unanimous. Thank you very much, folks. Okay, so I would recommend that we also consider moving a second motion to just move the regulation piece to the September board meeting for approval. Would anyone like to move that? Thank you, Trustee McNally. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor? And that is unanimous. All right, thanks, folks. Appreciate your patience as we work through that. All right, so our next item on our agenda is under C6, and this is the new policy on international student enrollment. And I know we do have just a policy, and there's two drafts. The newest draft, I believe, is on page 55 of the packet. And again, so the policy subcommittee is looking for direction on whether we need to do some further consultation or further development of the policy. So seeking some feedback from the committee. And again, it's the newest draft starts on page 55 of the packet. For context around this one, the committee itself we didn't come to consensus on the draft. So we got as far as we could on the draft, and we're now seeking, as per the board motion, some direction on where we go from here. In particular, there may be some room for, and I'm going to suggest an amendment to one of the paragraphs at 3.7. This is under the policy section on page 56. There was a lot of kind of back and forth and discussion about how to kind of phrase the intention here. The intention here is to ensure that there's some sort of pre-planning that goes on before we set any school-based international student enrollment. So the intention is to ensure that schools look to whether or not there is adequate space and educational programs and instructional support available to school-age children resident in the school district before considering weaving in additional enrollment of international students. So the wording of that paragraph had been one of the areas where we had some difficulty coming to any kind of solution around how to word it. I had a little more chance to think about it over the weekend and was going to suggest that we change the wording so that it would read: the Board of Education directs that prior to considering international student enrollments, schools must confirm that adequate space, educational programs, and instructional support is available to school-age children resident in the school district. Wondering if there's any interest in having a discussion about that, and then I'm happy to move that amendment. Trustee McNally, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I've lost track. There's big. There's lots of words, and I'm not exactly sure whether you're inserting that or you're replacing something that's already there with that. So yeah, if you could just clarify that for me, please.
Happy to. So it would read, so it would start with: the Board of Education directs that, and then everything else would not be there anymore. And then we would pick up with the amendments. So it would read: the Board of Education directs that prior to considering international student enrollment, schools must confirm that there is adequate space, educational programs, and instructional support available for school-age children resident in the school district. So there was and just to give some context for folks, it was difficult to kind of land on some wording here. The intention was to make sure that through policy, we set some direction for schools whereby there's an analysis in the context of enrollment planning each school year, where schools make sure that school-age children resident in the school district have adequate space, access to programming and instructional support before we weave in other student populations. So in this case, before we add in additional international students into the school population. But we wanted to do that and give that direction, but we wanted to use language that was thoughtful. So it was difficult to be clear, but also make sure that the language was as thoughtful as it could be. So just one way to maybe address that, still be clear, but do it in a way that is maybe more thoughtful. Go ahead, Nissa, you had a comment?
With that wording, was there a thought to the timelines that this might impose on school administrators? Because I don't know anything about this, but it seems that in order to determine how much space you might have to afford to international students, you would need to know about your enrollment from students in the catchment. And are those timelines, like, do they line up? Because it seems to me that a lot of planning goes into preparing for international students to arrive. So just a question about, would that impose an untenable timeline for school administrators?
Thanks for the question. Yeah, I mean, I could guess. I think we know our student population, but I wonder if Superintendent Whitten has any comments around that.
Okay,
Or Associate Superintendent Arts, perhaps?
Yeah, sorry, thanks. I believe the timeline would have to most likely work in the transfer process. We will know our catchment students already. We won't know which students are wanting to come to other schools outside of that. So that would be the timeline that I think we would have to line that up with, which our regular enrollment transfer process, if I'm understanding that question correctly.
Thank you. Thanks, Associate Superintendent. Okay, so yeah, and then the intention too, folks, is once we've got a policy direction, that the board is also directed that we create a regulation. And so that will kind of unpack some of the implementation pieces. And yeah, so I'm wondering if, I mean, I'm happy to move that so we can have a more formal discussion, or Trustee McNally and then Trustee Painter, you have some comments or questions? How about I move that and then we can have a discussion?
I'm sorry, where are we? Are you making a motion?
Yeah, I'm going to move that amendment to 3.7.
Right now, or can I comment on something else?
You're welcome. I was going to move it now, but I don't want to stop you from commenting on something else.
Well, it may be something that's not even appropriate, as I wasn't, at the policy committee or a member of this policy committee consideration. I'm just wondering if you could tell us a bit more about the discussion around 3.3, the active marketing and recruiting part.
Mind if we come back to that, Trustee McNally? I just want to make sure we close up 3.7 and then we can come back to whatever other aspect of the policy you wish.
Absolutely. No worries.
Trustee Painter, did you have a comment or question around 3.7, or was it something else in the draft?
Thank you, Chair. I was having trouble keeping up with my notes, and I was wondering, would it be possible to put the proposed language into the chat function so that we could have it in front of us?
Yes, absolutely. Let me do that. Just give me one moment and I'll do that. Trustee Gagnon, go ahead while I'm typing.
Thank you, Chair. My inner bureaucrat is going to absolutely hate me for what I'm about to say, but is there a way that we could possibly make it vaguer when it comes to saying, like, not compromising the process? Because as Nissa was saying, there are certain changes that can happen in enrollment and transfers that we may not be able to anticipate. So by putting it in like concrete writing, it's like we will not, like we will ensure that this happens. We may not be able to because certain deadlines will happen, and then we'll assign international students to a school, and then students may want to transfer after the fact. So if we went with language that was more like make every effort to, rather than we will, or make a reasonable effort or something like that, where we're saying it's like we're going to do our best, but without painting ourselves into the corner of promising it outright and always.
Yeah, so why don't we, so that was the language that I was suggesting as to, in the chat for folks. And, you know, we can move an amendment to the amendment, right? So if we think that the language needs to be softened, I mean, I think that then we can do that. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, you know, from my perspective anyways, as long as the intention is clear that there needs to be some pre-planning here, where, you know, there's always going to be changes, right? That's the world that we live in when it comes to an enrollment and transfers. There's always going to be some changes. And so I'm confident that administrators leave themselves a little bit of wiggle room, because they know that, for instance, over the summer, families might move in to particular neighborhoods, and there needs to be some accounting for that. So we don't live in a world of absolutes. We certainly could reflect that in the language and still, I think, get the intention across, which is that, you know, there needs to be this forward planning and thinking. So yeah, so Trustee Gagnon, did you have some like language in mind? Was it just the must confirm?
Yes, Chair. It would be must make every effort to confirm. It would just not be that absolute of must confirm, because that's almost an impossibility.
So to consider international student enrollment, schools must make every effort to confirm that, something like that.
Or every reasonable effort, something in that regard.
Yeah, must make every reasonable effort. Yeah, makes sense. Would you like to move that amendment to the amendment?
I don't think I can, because I am not.
Oh,
a member
you're
of this
not on the committee. Yes, you're right. Any other member of the committee like to move that? So must make every reasonable effort to confirm. So that's the language, and let's put that in the chat as well for ease of reference, especially for whoever's taking the minute this evening. Okay, would anybody like to move that? I mean, sure, Trustee David. Was that a hand to move that as an amendment to the amendment? All right, thank you. Okay, so let's discuss the amendment to the amendment, and then we'll work our way back. So, committee members, and you know, do we have any views about the must make every reasonable effort to confirm? I think it's just trying to account for that, you know, the world we live in, which is not absolute. Trustee McNally, go ahead.
Well, given that we all, I guess, know the realities of the world we live in and the changes that happen unexpectedly and are hard to anticipate. If you know, if a school administrator is going to look at adequate space, educational programs, and instructional support, I believe they're going to make every reasonable effort to confirm. So, although, you know, I take the good spirit of this amendment, I don't think it's necessary.
Okay. Thank you, Trustee McNally. Trustee Painter, did you have anything you wanted to add? And we're just talking about the amendment to the amendment.
Oh, amendment to the amendment only then. Yes, as another bureaucrat, I do recognize the comfort level that comes along with a less than absolute perspective on this one. My primary interest is a question about the main one, so I really don't have much to offer here.
Fair enough. All right. So I'm going to call us to a vote on the amendment to the amendment. And again, just the voting members of the committee, we're voting on whether we want to amend the amendment so that it would read that the Board of Education directs that prior to considering international student enrollment, schools must make every reasonable effort to confirm that adequate space, educational programs, and instructional support is available to school-age children resident in the school district. All those in favor of the amendment to the amendment? All those opposed? Okay, so we have 3 in favor and 1 opposed. Trustee McNally is opposed. All right, thanks, folks. Okay, now we're back to the main amendment. And so I just read it out, but I just want to confirm everybody's clear on the the amendment now. Where we are with the amendments to the amendment and all the rest of it. So again, we're now discussing, and Trustee Painter, I see your hand, you're up next. I just going to read it out just for absolute certainty that everybody's clear where we are. We are voting on an amendment that says the following. The Board of Education directs that prior to considering international student enrollment, schools must make every reasonable effort to confirm that adequate space, educational programs, and instructional support is available to school-age children. Okay, Trustee Painter, go ahead.
My question on this one was with respect to sort of compliance with our enrollment priorities, and I need to pull that up and have it in front of me. Just looking at the last line, available to school-age children resident in the school district. So I'm just trying to understand the scale at which this is being addressed. Is this envisioned that this would be evaluated at a school by school level? So a school would make sure that it can meet capacity. So then would we still be looking at children resident in the school district? I'm just trying to clarify that we're still sort of consistent with our catchment requirements and prioritization there.
Yeah, so this doesn't,
yeah.
So just to be clear, and that's a good question, Trustee Painter, yeah. This would not affect the student enrollment priorities. That would continue to be the expectation that the Board of Education student enrollment priorities are followed. Okay, any other thoughts, questions, queries before we vote on the amendment to 3.7? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor of the amendment? And that is unanimous. All right, thank you, folks. Okay, so any other thoughts and any other amendments? Any trustees want to? Well, no, sorry, we have a commitment to go back to, I believe it was 3.3. And Trustee McNally, correct me if I'm wrong. That was a section that you wanted to discuss around active marketing. I'll turn things over to you. Go ahead.
Well, I wasn't there, and maybe it's not appropriate to ask about the discussion in the committee, but I'm just wondering what pros and cons, or if any cons came up, on the committee in that discussion, if anybody was dubious about the active marketing and recruiting, when we're talking about the possibility of, not having enough space to serve students who do want to come here. After many years of running an international program, I could be really wrong about this, but one would think that, Victoria is known as a destination for education, and do we really need all that marketing and recruiting? So I don't know if there's any discussion or not. I guess yes or no.
Yeah, no, there wasn't a specific discussion around that particular piece, but I would just sort of say that, so the original board motion directed that the policy subcommittee put together a policy and a regulation around international student enrollment with particular reference to the Surrey School District policy and reg. So, and the approach there is very much to kind of support the program by having, you know, ongoing active marketing and recruitment activities. And so I think the intention is to, you know, continue to do so, and maybe to articulate, you know, how we go about doing that in a regulation eventually. So yeah, other than that, not much else I can offer around it, but I guess just to say that, you know, when I look at some of the other approaches taken in other school districts, there definitely is marketing and recruitment that goes on in the context of these programs. So,
yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Any other questions, comments on the draft? And then again, I think the committee is looking for some direction again around where we go if we need any other consultation, if the committee wants to direct us to do more. And then also in terms of additional information. So one of the other things we discussed at committee was the need to have some financial information, some enrollment information, and some projections for the board to consider in the context of the policy. And so, and I think kind of when we consider what other information the board needs when we're thinking about this policy and eventually the regulation, we also need to think about timing. So if we're going to make a change or shift in practice, really for the next school year, we really need to look to have this work, the policy work and the regulation work, and any information to the board before November. So really this month and next month, we need to focus on wrapping up this work so that in November, we can start to take steps to implement it, because that's really how early some of the work starts for the following school year. So yeah, wanting to hear from the committee if there's any direction for us in terms of any further consultation, or whether the committee has any other advice around financial information, enrollment, or projections for the board to consider. Lisa, go ahead.
I would just like to echo Board Member McNally's concern as I read it of the recruitment piece. I do understand that international students are a source of revenue for individual schools that help make programs better for everyone at the school. However, in a public school system, I think it's important to understand how we're seeing monies flow into our schools, and whether that's benefiting all of the student body or being centered around particular programs or segments of our educational population. Given the challenges that we face in meeting the diverse needs in our communities, which I see as a central role for public education.
Yeah, no, thanks so much, Nissa. Yeah, that certainly is part of the reason that the board is kind of bringing this policy and then eventually the regulation forward, is to make sure that we're, you know, our practice is in line with some of those core principles and our core obligation to provide public education to, you know, school age children resident here in the school district. So yeah, certainly from my perspective, 100% agree. The regulation that would be coming forward will hopefully speak to some of that nuance and some of those values. Trustee McNally, go ahead.
Thank you. I just feel uneasy about leaving the active recruiting and marketing part to the regulation. I mean, we're stating in policy really that we're I'm sorry, I'm rusty after being away for a while on a medical leave, but I'm uneasy about stating so emphatically that we are seeking money from really what is an entrepreneurial effort. And I recognize the value in, you know, a mix of cultures in this world is important, but I just am uncomfortable with the entrepreneurial aspect of it, and I don't know that I can support this really comprehensive policy just on that one sub point.
Trustee McNally, just wanted to get some further, tease that out a little bit more. So if you don't mind, I think this is my understanding, and then maybe I can turn to staff to kind of contextualize it further beyond what I'm capable of doing. But my understanding is that sort of active marketing and recruiting activities is a widespread practice when it comes to international student programs. And I imagine that to some extent there's variation in terms of how much investment there is in those activities, depending on the program. But I think the intention is to put together a regulation which speaks to some of that. Are you suggesting that you think we should be removing, like just saying like we in Greater Victoria School District, we don't want to be investing in those activities, period?
No, that's not exactly what I'm thinking in sort of a tangled way right now, but I'd rather, I don't know if this makes any sense, bureaucratically, I'd rather see it in the regulation than in the policy. I mean, the policy, to me, the policy is one thing, that we welcome international students. They're going to be charged a fee. They enrich the experience for themselves and the rest of our students. And, the rest of the policy. How that's going to be done belongs in the regulation, because apparently we can't really achieve the input of international students without going out globally and actively seeking them out, which I don't know, I'm kind of skeptical about. But yeah, I'd rather see it in the regulation, if that makes any sense, than in a policy that says we will be entrepreneurial in seeking out actually extra revenue.
So what it says right now, so that is the intention, right? So it's just a placeholder in the policy to say, we know we're going to do this kind of activity as part of this program, but we're going to describe how that looks in a supporting regulation. So absolutely, it wouldn't, how it looks, that kind of activity is not going to be in the policy. It's simply a placeholder to say, we're going to describe those activities and how we do them in the supporting regulation. Yeah, go ahead, Trustee McNally. Yeah.
So if it's not in the policy, we can't talk about it in the regulation? I'm just trying to be clear.
Yeah, no, I mean, in theory we could, but I think it would be potentially difficult to do so if we didn't sort of put that placeholder in to say, look, to acknowledge that these activities go on, and to say we're going to speak to those in the supporting regulation.
Well,
so it depends on what we
Chair.
want to do. Yeah.
To me, it's vastly more than a placeholder. It's a major endorsement of entrepreneurial funding for a public school district, from my point of view. Anyway, here we are.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, that's the point of having these discussions, right? Is to kind of tease out what the board wants to see. And, it might be that you want to suggest an amendment to that paragraph to move us in a slightly different direction there. So I'll leave that to you to consider. Yeah, Nissa, go ahead.
If I can just offer, I'm going to put on my bureaucrat hat with the provincial government, having worked with policy and regulation. And in my experience, the policy broadly does speak to defining what is hashed out in the regulation. So maybe to speak to board member McNally's point, maybe it's just the framing of how like, we need to address this, maybe, is the framing. And then then it's, if the policy wording is not pro or against or promoting or saying or against promotion of international student programs, but says that the details will be spoken to in the regulation, I think that's an appropriate approach, because speaking to it in the regulation without scoping it in the policy, I think would be more difficult or less transparent to people reading the documents and wanting to see a clear narrative and understanding what the intent was.
Thanks very much. No, agreed. Along those lines, Trustee McNally, so I mean, right now it reads, the Board of Education believes it is appropriate to conduct active marketing and recruitment activities. So, you know, again, along the lines of what Nis is suggesting, you could suggest an amendment which makes the language more neutral, without a sort of value judgment. Maybe the Board of Education acknowledges that marketing and recruitment activities to attract international students are carried out. And this
Chair, I absolutely would go with that wording. If I may steal your words and make an amendment.
You go right ahead.
Okay, I'm doing it. What she said.
Okay, so
I would like to make that amendment. I just, your exact wording kind of flew from my head. Acknowledges that the Board of, let me find the document. Now I've lost the document. If you have the document right in front of you, can you read it with your amendment?
Yes, I was just suggesting that the Board of Education acknowledges that marketing and recruitment activities are carried out to attract international students to the school district. Maybe full stop?
Personally can really live with that. So I guess we can vote on whether anybody else likes it or not.
Okay, so you're moved, and so let's just clarify. Let's go back to the document. So it would be a full stop then after school district. And then maybe these activities will be described in the supporting regulations, something like that. I don't think we can just say as described in the supporting regulations, I don't think. But Trustee McNally, what would you like to do? This is your amendment.
Yes. Okay, I'm trying to find the document again. The Board of Education acknowledges that active marketing and recruiting activities will take place to attract international students, etc.
So, Trustee McNally, Trustee Kwan very helpfully, thank you, Trustee Kwan, put in the chat, was typing away diligently. The Board of Education, and actually has put it in the chat. So the Board of Education acknowledges that marketing and recruitment activities are carried out to attract international students to the school district as described in the supporting regulation. You know what, when I see it in black and white, it does make sense without a full stop. Yeah. Thank you, Trustee Kwan. Trustee McNally, are you happy with that amendment and would you like to move it?
Yes, I am. And if Trustee Kwan would like to take credit for that amendment.
We don't need a seconder.
Developed it.
We don't
I'll
need
let go of it.
Well, Trustee Kwan provided transcription services for us this evening. Thank you very much. So Trustee McNally, you're moving it. We don't need a seconder.
Okay.
So because we're at committee, but thank you to everybody for the teamwork. Any discussion? Trustee McNally is moving it. Any discussion of the amendment? Okay, so no discussion, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the amendment, and again, just the voting members of the committee, please. And that is unanimous. Okay, thank you very much, folks. Anything else in the policy that folks would like to amend or speak about? Otherwise, I'm just going to turn us back to this question of where we go from here. So we have some timelines that we need to work to around this if we want to see some change implemented in the next school year. Obviously, we have some work to do around creating a regulation. And then there's some other kind of information, some financial information, some projections and enrollment data that the board will want to look at. And I would suggest that we have that ready to go for the September board meeting, and so that we have enough runway to finalize the regulation in October. Wondering how folks are feeling about those timelines? So we would look to finalize the policy at September board with the additional financial information and projections and so on. And then we would move in October to finalize the regulation. Does that make sense to everybody? I wanted to just turn to the Secretary Treasurer, if I may, because Secretary Treasurer, the financial data in particular will come, I'm sure, from you and your team. Is it realistic to get those financial data together for September board meeting?
I think that's really, really tight for us to get turned around that fast, given when we have to have the agenda package done up. So we're talking about next Wednesday. If that, maybe we could look at one of the standing committee meetings in October instead.
Yeah, or we could also do a special board meeting if we had to, but yeah. So you're suggesting that maybe the financial information comes to first, what you're thinking, ed policy in the first week of October? Is that what you're suggesting?
I think most importantly, we would need to get an understanding from Jeff Davis, Director of International Education, on what he feels is the impact of this policy, and then we would go from there. So if we're looking at a change in enrollment, then we can do the calculations based on that. So it's going to take a little bit of coordination, I think, with him and his team.
Yeah, we're going to look at enrollment. I think there's a number of pieces, right? There's the financial pieces, and then there's enrollment and projections. So do you think it's more tenable to look at the first ed policy of October, keeping in mind the timelines and the intention to have some change being rolled out in the next school year?
Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out when the ed policy is. It's like early October.
Yeah, it's the first Monday, so it would be I believe it's the 2nd of October this year.
So that might give us an extra week.
We would give about an extra week. Yeah. Yeah, Trustee Kwan, go ahead.
Isn't the 2nd when we recognize Truth and Reconciliation Day? Isn't that a holiday?
Have we moved? Sorry, let me just see then. Okay, let me just go to double check the date for ed policy this year. Unless anybody has it in front of them.
It's the 9th.
I think it's
The 9th?
September 9th.
Oh, okay.
October 9th.
That's great. That's very
October
helpful.
9th.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so we do have that gives you quite a lot more time. Okay, so we'd look to the first week of ed policy, or
That's
sorry,
thanks.
the first week.
That's Thanksgiving, October 9th.
When are we having ed policy in October, folks? Let's go to the website.
It's on the 16th in my calendar.
It's on the 16th. Really? Wow, it's late this year. Okay. So ed policy on the 16th, are we sure? Yeah, the superintendent saying, yeah, it's definitely the 16th of October. Okay, so I assume that's plenty of time, but I don't want to make assumptions. So the 16th is when we'd be looking to bring it back to committee. Okay, with the financial information. Okay. So with that in mind, so we're going to my suggestion then, with that in mind, is that we look to refer this to ed policy in October. We've got the date. And then that'll also give the committee some time to start drafting the regulation. So we can play a little catch up. You've given us a little room to play catch up on the rig. So thanks, folks. Okay, so do we need a motion to that effect? That we want to refer the policy reg with the relevant additional data, we're going to call it additional data, to ed policy in October 2023. Does that make sense, folks? I think we should do a motion. We need another placeholder, make sure it's clear on the record where what we're directing here. Would anybody like to move that? Thank you, Trustee Bayo. All right. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor then? And that is unanimous. Okay. Thank you, folks. Just bear with me a second. I'm going to head back to our agenda for the evening and see where we are. I believe we've got some revised draft policies. Yes, we do. Okay, so we're moving on to item C7. This is, we wanted to review the policy and regulation and draft administrative procedure on student placement. Well, we've got policy 5123 on student placement. We also have a regulation on promotional procedures for secondary schools. And then we also, at C7C, we have the draft administrative procedure on student retention. So if folks could go to their packups under C7. The intention here was to bring this to the board. It's another one of these policies that's really, frankly, just out of date. And earlier in the meeting, Trustee Kwan spoke to this. And so really, we wanted to do some housekeeping. One, we want to look at what needs to be done with this out of date policy and reg. And then also, you know, we have a draft administrative procedure. So we need to kind of really just address any gaps in the policy and the reg so that it can, staff can roll out an administrative procedure that makes sense and is in line with, in alignment with an up-to-date board policy and regulation. So opening the floor for some discussion about where we are and where we need to go with this. Trustee McNally, yeah, go ahead.
I can, because I've been out of the loop for a while. Has this gone through discussion in policy committee? Because I can see right away, it's like, no, you know, it needs a lot of work. So why, may I ask, why isn't it at policy committee and then brought to us here at Ed Policy? I just don't kind of understand that procedure.
Yeah, well, we just, we haven't had any direction as a policy subcommittee to undertake that work. It came to light in a different context that possibly there was some gaps here and a need to do some work to update things. And so, yeah, really just looking through this standing committee structure to get some direction. We figured it may well end up at policy subcommittee, but wanted to start with some board direction first. So yeah, so that's why it's here. Does the board want us to do that work, or do we want to send it elsewhere? It doesn't necessarily have to start at policy subcommittee, but maybe it does. Yeah, go ahead, Trustee McNally.
Okay, I'd like to move that this policy be moved to consideration by the policy committee before coming back to Ed Policy and on to the board.
Fair enough. Thank you, Trustee McNally. So you're moving that. Any discussion? So just to be clear, you're moving that the policy and the regulation go to policy subcommittee for review and before coming back to education policy and directions. Did you want to include a timeline of any kind? We do have a lot of work at policy subcommittee. So if this is a priority, then I think we need to know that as a policy subcommittee, because we are very busy trying to update stuff.
I realize the policy committee is a committee that has a lot of work to do. Some of the policies that are in place haven't been touched for decades, so I get that. And I also know that we as trustees don't really have a lot to do with regulation, although if there's something glaring that we'd like to comment to staff about or make a suggestion about, we can do that. But am I losing the train of thought here? I would like the policy to go back to the policy committee and then come back to our subcommittee for approval or not to go on to the board.
Yeah, fair enough. No, I just wondered if there was any timeline that you wanted us to suggest. Otherwise, we'll just prioritize it as needed amongst all of the.
I would leave it with the policy committee. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. All right. Thank you, Trustee McNally, for moving that. Any discussion, folks? All right. Hearing none. All those in favor? At the show of hands, and that is unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate that. All right, so we're at that place in our agenda. We've made it through everything where I don't know if we have any notice of motions this evening. Did anybody have any notice of motions for the committee tonight? No, okay. Don't have any general announcements, and so it's that time to adjourn. Would anybody like to move for adjournment? Thank you, Trustee McNally. We could stay and have a further chat if you like. I'm glad everybody enjoyed themselves. All right, all those in favor of adjournment? And that's unanimous. Thanks.